Ultimately, what you're calling for here is for your institution to have a bit more power, to be able to have more control. What is it? Can you explain about the self-certification? What is it that so worries you? What situations have you seen already that's led to some problems?
Yeah, so ultimately what I'm calling for is really like more comprehensive whole of government regulation, very similar to what we have with like traditional finance, TradFi, right? So it's going to be multiple government agencies involved. That's going to have greater customer protections and stronger federal oversight. So if we have this additional authority that's provided to the CFTC, like over the regular Bitcoin market or over the spot market, I don't think we can just port over the rules that we have now that relates to the futures market that we have, like the Bitcoin futures market that we regulate. So I think we don't want to fast track assets that are going to be listed on exchanges. The CFTC should have more authority over that. We want to make sure that someone's not trying to do an end run around the SEC with their jurisdiction. We want to make sure that we can protect the market against manipulation. And, at this point, it's going to be very, very difficult for some exchange to self-certify that what they put on is not readily susceptible to manipulation. And there's a lot of issues with that. So it's really kind of coming up with a new process because it would be a new market and it would need strong oversight.
What was so interesting was perhaps a lack of oversight and due diligence from some internal players within the system. As this new burgeoning area of crypto evolved, there was a lot of money, a FOMO feel, people pouring investment into now, failed companies. And many of us in the media and elsewhere asked, what about those institutional players? What about the due diligence that completely was lacking at certain VCs? People who've been around for years, for decades, that just seem to lose their head in this situation. Are enough questions being asked of those institutional players about their accountability, do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. There are serious, serious questions about whether they fulfilled their fiduciary duties to their clients. What kind of due diligence did they conduct? Let's just start with the fact that if you are investing hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars that in a company a year later or so, you have to write it down to zero or close to zero. That's already going to raise questions about the due diligence you're conducting. But when the new FTX CEO, John Ray, says in court and in the bankruptcy filings, there's absolutely no record keeping, right? There's absolutely no controls. We've got an auditor no one's ever heard of. Then you say, well, how is that possible? So did they turn a blind eye to it? Were they just distracted by like this promise of innovation? We know that FTX and its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, really chased trying to get the public trust. Everything they did, the messaging was, we're trustworthy, you can trust in us. We know now that that's not true, right? That they violated the trust. But, we have this situation where, the market was hot. There was a lot of competition in there, a lot of equity to be had. And why did they turn a blind eye to what should have been really flashing red lights when it comes to due diligence? So I do think there are serious questions there. There might actually be conflicts, too. You see this highly interconnected nature. So was there some conflicts that prevented them from really paying attention to the due diligence and the facts that they were uncovering?
Self-certification, something that's interesting to me, too, that whether it's self-certifying certain assets that are being listed or just going ahead and providing certain products to clients, lending products, other products. I mean, how much now, whether it's the CFTC, the SEC, or the Department of Justice, how much cleanup work is there to do? It seems like, based on the velocity of cases that are being brought forward, even above and beyond FTX, that there's a lot of enforcement by regulation, and there's a lot more conviction in regulators and authorities saying, hey, these are new products with the same classifications as some of the old financial products we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the products have very similar features, and there's a lot of the same risk that you see in crypto that you saw in traditional finance. First of all, we've been regulating in the futures space and allowing trading to happen in Bitcoin futures and Ether futures as long as it's registered with us. And FTX actually had LedgerX, which was one of their entities registered with us, which is not part of the bankruptcy. But the fact of the matter is we also have to do enforcement. We have to bring trust and confidence to the American people that we are doing our job. We have this police authority to go in and to bring enforcement actions. We have to do that. That helps keep the market clean, and that's an important part of our job. And I'm a 20-year federal law enforcement official, so to me, enforcement is part of regulation, but we're doing both at the CFTC, both trying to supervise it, the trading that we can, where we have authority, and bringing enforcement cases, even though we don't have regulatory authority, but we have enforcement authority in the cash market.
Commissioner, a sensitive one for you, because you talk about confidence. We asked our own audience how confident they were that regulation would come to bear. We asked them a little while back, in the wake of the FTX, are you confident the right crypto regulation will come? Well, 38% said don't hold your breath, and actually 36% said no. What can you do now? What can you say? What do you think you're able to get across that gives people the confidence that it can be brought in and we're not just depending on basically self-regulation?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people in Congress on a bipartisan basis who want to do something. I mean, when I look at this, you got a lot of regular people who are getting crushed in these bankruptcies. Think of like Celsius, and now you're going to have Genesis. You've got FTX. You've got a lot of people who need some customer protection. So I think there's a lot of goodwill in Congress to get something through. I do think it's appropriate to take a pause after FTX for Congress to say, have we made sure that any legislation we're thinking about like addresses all of the lessons learned that we have from FTX? And that's what led me to say, you know what, we should really think about this idea of this fast-track self-certification process. I, as a regulator, would want to have more oversight tools over exchanges to be able to say, no, that's not appropriate, to have some independence, governance, and to have some control. So I think the possibility is there, but let me just say, I understand it's going to take time to do this right in a comprehensive way, but what matters the most is that we get something right that stands the test of time.
You know, it's interesting that you worked in the wake of the financial crisis with the troubled asset relief program. So you have seen very messy unwinds. This time around, there is a lot of relief that it wasn't a more systemic problem. To the extent that you're still worried about systemic problems, especially with places that do intersect more seriously with the current financial system, stablecoins, how much concern do you still have?
So I have a lot of concern about financial stability risk. Let's separate that out from systemic risk. Financial stability risk is not something we take our eyes off. We have to continue to look at that. When you look at all these people that are hurt, when you look at the domino effect that happens when all of these different investors come in, and we're still seeing the impact of FTX's collapse right now. Systemic risk is going to come, in my mind, as you get more links between the traditional financial market and the crypto market. Over the last 6 months, I've heard more and more of TradFi say that they want to become interested. And that's why I've been warning, well, if you're going to become interested, you really have to understand kind of how this operates. You really have to understand where there are some weaknesses. Commingling customer assets with company assets is a big weakness. Lots of conflicts of interest that are not resolved is a big weakness. Cybersecurity, the same. You've got to really have strong cybersecurity issues. So I think, you know, as the traditional financial players are sort of looking into this, you know, there's still some interest, but hopefully this is going to take everyone, make a pause and do better due diligence.
Oh, speaking of due diligence, speaking of commingling, I'm kind of curious about your sense of the difference between what happened at Genesis and what happened over at FTX. Obviously, no one has been accused of anything at Genesis, but there's been a concern from the Winklevoss twins here about the potential commingling between the intercompany loans at Genesis. Now that they're going through a bankruptcy process of their own, how does a regulator, how does the CFTC look at something like that in terms of just general corporate behavior?
Yeah, so I'm going to be careful about speaking about any particular company because we are a law enforcement office, and so I want to be careful about that. But I will say we are looking across the industry. We are looking to where we're going to bring cases. We are bringing cases constantly, you know, bringing cases against a Dow, bringing cases against an Oracle manipulator, bringing cases, we brought a case against Tether about how stable their stablecoin is. So I think our job is to sort of look across and say, you know, where is it appropriate to bring the case in a way that not only brings, you know, compliance with the law, but also sends a message to others who are in the market about, you know, what we expect good behavior.